I'm Amy Cannon. I'm with the Public Works and Transportation in their Stormwater Management Division. So I'm going to give y'all tonight a very high overview of what the major initiatives are with our group, and then go into more specific West Arlington projects, similar to what Keith did. So since 2010, when Tropical Storm Hermine hit the Rush Creek watershed and flooded out quite a lot, we've undergone the watershed study program. We started with basically the whole goal was to update our floodplain information and identify ways to basically mitigate flooding and erosion issues. And so that was really just driven by the fact when Hermine hit, we realized that we didn't know where all of our flood risks were. And so that's the purpose of the watershed study program, is to take a comprehensive look at each watershed throughout the city and identify the flood risk, update it based on what's in the ground today, identify where the erosion issues are occurring, and then update the FEMA floodplain maps. We're also using this information as a way to educate the public. When we find out an area is at higher risk of flooding, or it has specific stormwater issues related to it, we will do outreach to it to let them know, hey, buy flood insurance, protect your property, understand what your risks are so that you're appropriately covered when something happens. So our progress to date is actually we're getting close to being done with the study portion of the watershed study program. And so this slide is really just to kind of show you which watersheds that we've basically adopted through council. And I will provide this presentation to him if y'all don't want to take pictures of all the slides you use, so y'all can actually see what this is and reference this. So y'all can actually see that since we've adopted quite a lot of the city, and that's the capital plan, as well as where the flood risks are. And right now, we're finishing up the Trinity Tribs in North Arlington, the Lower Village Creek, Upper Village Creek, which hugs Lake Arlington, and Lynn and Bowman Branch. And so those are pending FEMA review right now. We have all the information related to them as the capital program, as well as where the flood and erosion issues are. We're just kind of going through the FEMA process now, and what we typically like to do is see, even though we have FEMA involved in the entire process, we like to see what they say once we get to that final step and make sure it's within where they like to see it from a mapping standpoint. And then once we have a good sense of where FEMA is and that they're okay with it, we'll send it to council to actually adopt the watershed study plan that is being generated. And so this is kind of a general where everything is now. We're at the stage right now to where we're combining all of the plans into one comprehensive plan to go along with a localized drainage analysis initiative that we started back in 2018 after the fall floods. And that's basically the areas that are away from the creek. They don't have any identifiable open stormwater infrastructure, but they have storm drains that are potentially undersized along those lines. So we've been analyzing 60 areas, and right now we're going through the process of developing a comprehensive plan. And so what a comprehensive plan is for the stormwater management program is it takes all of the requirements from a FEMA level, from a U.S. Army Corps of Engineer level, from the TCEQ level, and then starts taking a look at our capital improvement projects that we've been identifying through these initiatives, where our maintenance needs are, what kind of stormwater compliance initiatives we need, so water quality, stormwater quality, and then public education initiatives that we've been working on through the floodplain program, which is there a better way that we can outreach to residents? And so we're going to take all of this information and actually put it together in one document. And so just to kind of give you a guideline for that, for the whole capital improvement projects, the capital plan for the stormwater program, we're going to be looking at 3 primary areas, which is infrastructure maintenance, erosion, and flooding. And all of these will be brought together to do data-driven prioritization. So when we look at flooding, we're going to be looking at mainly flood risk. How frequently do people flood? What are the number of structures that are impacted? The critical infrastructures such as schools, hospitals, electrical, things that if they are disrupted, like there's a pretty significant potential for either loss of life, just basically a public health issue. Like it's hard to evacuate a school. So we want to put a priority, if there is a school at risk, put a priority on fixing the flooding issues around there. Same thing with nursing homes and hospitals. From an erosion risk standpoint, we actually went through and walked each street and identified where banks are severely unstable, or if they are stable, or if they are purple as in they need emergency repair. So we'll be going through and taking a look and seeing like, okay, if a bank is at severe risk of failure and there's an opportunity to mitigate flooding, then we're going to look at projects like that combine those flooding and erosion initiatives. And then from an infrastructure maintenance standpoint, you can see here that we've got a concrete line channel that's just collapsed. It's no longer in working condition. And so we'll be taking a look at basically all of our storm drains, flumes, inlets, concrete line channels, what their condition is. Like he talked about the red streets, things like that. We'll be doing the same thing with our stormwater infrastructure. So we have a kind of a sense of bringing in flooding, erosion, and infrastructure maintenance. We'll do the worst first is the best way to look at that. We'll also be considering, regulatory risk of non-compliance. So if this is something where we're going to be non-compliant with like FEMA or the Corps, we're going to focus on those, as well as if there's cost efficiency. So if Keith's group is doing a streets project and then there's an opportunity to mitigate flooding in the area, we'll partner with them and make sure that the city gets the best bang for their buck when we actually do a project. We'll also be putting an emphasis on roadway flooding. So if we have an area that's highly traveled, we want to make sure that people, when they're driving on those roads and it's flooding, that there's a lower risk of them, if they make the decision to drive into water, which they shouldn't, that there's a lower risk of them being swept off the road. So from a timeline standpoint, localized flooding analysis, which is those 60 areas away from the floodplain, that we have done all the analysis portion of that. We finished the analysis portion of the watershed study. And this year we're focusing on prioritizing all of these projects and activities that need to be done so we can actually start having a game plan and then identifying funding potential. So if we have grant opportunities or if there's other ways that we need to fund it, we'll be identifying it through the plan. And then the goal is to have the plan for council adoption in 2021. In terms of projects in West Arlington, we have the Country Club Drainage Improvements and Bridge Maintenance Project that is currently underway. You may have passed it along Park Road, but we are repairing a concrete bridge girder and then also doing channel improvements, protect some sanitary sewer lines and mitigate flooding within the neighborhood. So that construction started back in September, and right now we're scheduled to finish around May 2020, weather permitting. We also have the Matthewsport Drainage Improvements Phases 1 and 2, which just bid a few weeks ago, and the construction contract will actually be on the council agenda on the 28th of this month. But these are drainage improvements that are along Randall Mill Road within the neighborhood that's generally bounded by Fielder, Sanford, and Oakwood. And so this is upgrades to the channel to mitigate flooding for about 65 homes that are in that area. Construction is anticipated to start in April 2020 and finish in December 2021. We will have a phase 3 of this project, and so that will be additional storm drain improvements in Fielder Road. And so right now we're finalizing the design on that and expect to actually bid that next year as well. And so that's going to be the full neighborhood improvement. But this is actually one of the areas that were identified in a watershed study that needed significant improvement. And then currently, Randall Mill Park Pond is being dredged. So that started back in October 2019. This is just maintenance. There's going to be no improvements to the pond. It's just to maintain the amount of muck that's accumulated in it. And so we're expecting that one to be done next month. So right now it's looking like it will stay on that track, weather permitting. And then Rush Creek at Indian Trail erosion improvements. This one's actually still under design. This is where Indian Trail crosses Rush Creek, kind of in a rural area next to Dalworthington Gardens. This is a stream stabilization project to protect Indian Trail. We're expecting construction to start, or bidding will be probably closer to April 2020. We just got Corps approval for this. We've been hung up in the Corps review process. So we're expecting bidding in 2020, and then construction should be relatively done early next year. So with that, I know that was pretty quick. Are there any questions?
If somebody is coming into the area, can they go online and look up these areas that may be potential flood hazards?
Yes.
And how would they do that?
It's the Arlington Maps Online has the actual floodplain information on it. Now the thing is the localized drainage areas, those are the ones that aren't featured on. So they can see the floodplain information on the city's website and on the Arlington Maps. But if they have specific questions on whether or not their neighborhood floods, they can actually call Public Works, and we can walk them through on what kind of flood risks there are in their neighborhood.
Okay, and what is the Arlington one?
Arlington Maps. It's on the city's website.
Okay.
So we've had some changes in weather patterns that have sort of changed how we're looking at this thing. How does Arlington compare to neighboring cities and that kind of stuff that are all in this Trinity drainage system? So are we in the same spot? Are we behind? Are we, in other words, how have other cities been addressing some of these same issues and where do we stand?
Well, we're kind of, comparing ourselves to other cities. I feel like, and this may be my bias, I feel like we're ahead on some level because we are embarking on a comprehensive approach to actually prioritizing all of our flood risk. The benefit that we've got is that we've been able to go through and study all of our watersheds and then bring in the localized analysis on it. Now, I would like to be a lot further along, but for a 10-year effort, like we've accomplished a lot, and we're setting ourselves up within the next few years to have some really solid information to be able to manage the program where it's clear to everyone.
So other cities haven't even done it comprehensive?
Not all of them, no. No, it's usually just kind of like, we kind of know there's an issue here, and so we're going to go and tackle that. And so we're moving it, right now this is the thing everyone's realizing in stormwater is like we've got these pretty big needs in Texas. It's been pretty apparent in the last few years across the state. There's pretty big flooding issues. And so right now we are moving our program in that, just across the state in these directions to make sure that we take a comprehensive approach to basically dealing with watershed-wide issues. So.
Thank you.
First of all, I would like to compliment you guys on what you've done so far. I've seen the comprehensive watershed study that's up to Division Street. Unfortunately, in our neighborhood, her neighborhood, we're north of Division Street, and I have an email from 4 years ago when they started surveying that area. First part of the question is that report, as I understood it, 2021?
Yeah, for the entire city. So which neighborhood are you in?
Specifically Interlochen, but there's several neighborhoods north of Division Street where we have not seen the study yet. We've seen it up to Division Street. And then the bigger problem is I know there are money issues, there's time issues, there's FEMA issues, there's Corps issues. The biggest problem is the city's continuing to build along the watershed before this report comes out. We've had flooding that continues as more developments are proposed that drain into our watershed. And our biggest issue, and it becomes politics, it becomes organizing, but it shouldn't have to. I understand the whole squeaky wheel theory, but there continue to be developments proposed along a watershed where we don't even know what's been published yet. So I guess it's our question, when is that part going to be published? And then is your input looked for before these developments are green lighted, because it seems from our perspective, they're not. We've had to go before zoning, before council, too many times to try to even ask if the flooding and the erosion is considered when a new project is considered.
Okay, so up to Division Street, that's generally the Rush Creek area. And so we do use that data. So when a development comes in, even though FEMA hasn't mapped that yet, because it's it's a large enough watershed, it's in a different process than the rest of the watersheds have been, but FEMA has accepted it. And so we use that data, and we provide it to the developers, and they have to actually put their development in and show us and prove to us. We have a review contract that actually takes a look at the flood studies that they submit on that. Now with Interlochen, we actually do have watershed information for Interlochen. What we found when we were actually evaluating it is that we need to look at Village Creek as a whole. And so that goes all the way up to Burleson. And so that's a regional effort, because you're right, when there is more development coming in, there has to be a comprehensive look